Hi, welcome to another Consonant Analysis. My analysis today is going to be about Jimmy Savile. I've already done an analysis on him, and I was inspired to produce another one based on one of the articles that I'd come across in my research. And this was an article produced by somebody called, well, the author, Dan Davis, and the quotation that I've taken is actually one that Dan Davis took from Savile personally as an investigative reporter, and the quote is simply, "I am the Myra Hindley story," and it was like years later that the reporter actually found this scribbled on a piece of paper, and one of the one of the things that he bemoans is that he's still unable to pick anything out of that. It's like the subject, i.e. Jimmy Savile, was like an enigma, a man of riddles who was very difficult to get to the bottom of. So I thought, well, I'll give it a try with consonant analysis and see if I can get to the bottom of things with my forensic technique. And indeed, the results, they don't disappoint. You may find them rather disturbing. So just as a trigger warning, if you are triggered by acts of violence and murder and these types of things, especially involving young children, it's probably a good idea for you to not watch this video and switch off now. So the interpretation that I get for this is that basically Savile, the subject, had knowledge of the events that took place, and that he was willing to take an interview in order to relate that information to an interviewer, and it doesn't seem much more than that, really. In the forward analysis, the reverse analysis. The reverse analysis is where I take the consonants out of somebody's speech and I reverse them, and that usually gives me the underlying meaning, the hidden meaning, the meaning that they don't want to come out, but does come out. Whereas the forward analysis, I've done both in this analysis. The forward analysis is where I take the consonants out of a person's speech and I just read them as they are, as the person's actually spoken them. In the reverse analysis, what comes out actually is a blow-by-blow account, a fly-on-the-wall account of like what Myra Hindley and Brady actually did. It's as though you're actually there, and it's quite disturbing. I found it disturbing as I was going through the markers. It's like I was receiving pictures of a story as it was like unfolding from the two planning an attack to capturing somebody, throwing them in a car, and scolding and berating them for not doing what they were told, getting them to comply, and then eventually just murdering them and driving away. So that's very vivid, and you would think from receiving something like that basically Savile was there, because of the detail. But I don't know when the interviewer sat down and asked him to provide information, and whether that was actually after the fact, after it was made public what Brady and Hindley had actually been up to, and the sort of like details. So now to go on to the highlights. So I'll go on to the highlights. The first is to be seriously ill. The marker to be seriously ill, which is actually an exact marker, that occurs in this analysis and also in a previous analysis, the previous analysis that I did. So if you check in my videos, you'll actually find that listed under Savile James. And it emphasises the notion that he was actually mentally sick or sick of heart. The analysis that I've done previously was of Savile in his last radio presentation. So he was a radio presenter for the last time on BBC Radio, and there you get the impression that he was feeling old and tired. So it's reasonable to assume that the marker to be seriously ill was he was actually was feeling ill, physically, and perhaps he was. But however, the marker occurs here as well, so it's almost seems like his signature, and it's not really about being physically ill; it's about being sick of heart, which he was rumoured to be, basically, based on all of the accounts that are told of him. So the next highlight is public reputation. This is actually a component that appears in a marker. And so I put here, this marker component may indicate the internal realization to the subject of the ramifications of making a statement. So it's like he's now let it slip out. Oh dear, did I really want to say that? For somebody to actually say something like that, I mean, with the image that Jimmy Savile has, the public image, for him to actually come out and say something like, I am the Myra Hindley story to an investigative reporter, is not really going to do his street cred any good. Highlight 3, I am the. So this extract, or this segment of the extract, I am the Myra Hindley story. When I actually looked at that and what words it actually correlated with, it correlates with marker 240924, which actually occurs in both the forward and the reverse analyses, and I'll come on to that particular point. So I put this segment of the extract correlates to the marker 240924, which relates to walking by a place, which leads credence to the notion that perhaps the subjects knew where the burial places were and used to walk by them, and by extension the question of whether or not he had an immaterial role to play in the murders. It's as though with him saying I am there, the essence of everything is the actual places where the poor children were buried. And by extension, the question of whether or not he had any material role to play in the murders, given the fact that he knew where the bodies lay. So by using the phrase "I am," is the subject stating that in fact he was the instigator and mastermind behind the sadistic killings. In the themes below, which I come on to, there seems no demarcation between the idealised actions of the subject and Hindley. Does this further lend itself to the notion of Savile's active involvement? Because when I do the themes, when I've actually done the markers, it's like a muddled story. It's like, is it Savile that's doing this, or is it the killers? There seems to be like a blending. So it's not quite sure to tell whether he's just telling a story or he's actually part of it. Highlights 4, to provide and to require security. Do these markers, coupled with the marker containing the components of embarrassment and doing some a favour, which do exist in the markers, indicate that the subject was being paid to provide information but did not want to do so despite the offer of payment? So, in other words, he's not going to squeal or tell anything unless somebody's paid him, because why should he? So that notion comes across. On to comments. Comments 1. Parallels. The markers almost seem to parallel an abduction conducted by Hindley and Bradley from preparing planning of the type of victim, capture of the victim, and management of the victim, killing the victim and disposing of the victim. The analysis seems very succinct and does not waste any words. It seems very compact and precise. Did Savile obsess on Hindley's story? Did he wish for the opportunity to enact something similar himself? Because he was implicated in sadistic necrophilic acts, like in the hospital mortuary, for example. And he's been implicated or accused of like satanic acts as well, and all these types of things. So that being the case, would something like this not be beyond his remit? Given the fact that he actually did say himself, I am the Myra Hindley story, he actually said that himself. Comments 2, rebuking. Is this with reference to the victims for non-compliance? In the reverse analysis, there's an exact marker for rebuking. So was that the murderers or the killers actually rebuking the children for not doing what they were told? Because if you actually read, if you go into the source materials link in the description below, what you will find, you'll find an article, this actual article, where it talks about how the children were undressed and expected to do things nude before then they were sexually assaulted and then subsequently killed. So is this rebuking for the children refusing to do those things, which is quite natural? Comments 3, palindrome. The source, and this is the point about what occurs in both analyses, the link. The source article alludes to the subject's vague speech, and sure enough, this feature of his speech manifests itself in the form of a palindrome. That's a word that can be read both forwards and backwards the same. As follows. So I've got YM, the MY. That's the palindrome which occurs in the markers, which you'll see. Does this indicate a master of spin, someone practiced in obfuscation of the truth? Does it denote emphasis, the repetition of certain markers more than once in such a short phrase? Was the subject actually telling the reporter exactly what he wanted to know by emphasising those key markers, but in such a twisted way as to befuddle him? So he is actually telling, obviously consonant analysis brings out what people, are not saying. It will actually bring that out. That's the idea behind it. So is it the case that he's got all this stored up, and the most important parts he's considered are these three aspects, because there's sort of like three markers that are involved. These three markers are the most important parts of the story that he has to get right. Point 4, personal reaction. So this is my personal reaction while I was going through this. And as you may know from other analyses I've done, they do have a marked effect on a person. They do on me anyway. From being elated to being very shocked and being very sad. And this had a reaction on me as well. So the reaction this analysis had on me was, as I proceeded through the reverse analysis for the first time, that's the one where it's talking about what the murderers did, I was being told a story which I had heard told about the murderers, but not in such a point of view manner like a fly on the wall. It is as though I was there watching what was happening like a fly on the wall. When it got to the part about the victims, I immediately thought of my son. Where was he? Was he attended to and being watched by a responsible adult? Was he? Had there ever been any times in the past when me or his mother had let him out of our sight for a second? There was a genuine paranoia as I searched my thoughts with dread in my heart. The conclusion was in the negative. No, we'd never left him for a single second, thank God. But this short analysis brought out very strong feelings of protection for my child. It was a lesson. We do keep a very close eye on him, even down to what he watches, the company he keeps, the messages that he receives. But this was a wake-up call to even be more vigilant and even more emphatic in protecting him. I still, however, have each and every calculation of action of Hindley and Bradley flashing up images in my heart of the planning, the victims, the enticement, the lies, the shock and the reaction of the victims, especially in their final hours. I never want that to happen to anyone, any child, especially not my own precious son. And I mourn for those precious souls who were abused and expunged from the life of this earth that we all share in common. May the Lord grant them a permanent place in paradise without reckoning. My exhortation to you, my people, is never let your children out of your sight. Never let them roam. Make sure you are with them at all times. SubhanAllah. Comments 5. Reverse versus forward. As usual, the forward analysis seems to be all about the present, with the interviewer sat with the subject, whereas the reverse analysis is all about the underlying messages. In this case, the subject's knowledge of that he does not wish to disclose. Point 6. Forward. This could be interpreted as follows. The subject is happy to meet the interviewer because it makes him feel wanted, but it comes at a price because the subject requires payment, even though the subject intends to exaggerate his claims and tell outright lies for his own self-aggrandizement, therefore actually hiding the truth. And comment 7. Themes 3 forwards. That's in the forward analysis where Savile sat down talking to the interviewer. Themes 3. Here one gets the idea of double protection. The first comes in the form of assurances and agreements, possibly between the subject and the interviewer. The second in terms of the shield of deception that the subject has planned to place over the proceedings. So in both cases, for Savile, it was win-win. He wasn't going to lose either way. He was getting something from the interviewer, and he made sure what he was going to do himself. So themes for the reverse, let's go on to those quickly. I put these into 4 groupings. Hindley and Savile, again, Savile and victims, rest in peace or rest in paradise. So Hindley and Savile, deception, despicable, illness, lies, trouble, weariness. And then the second Hindley and Savile grouping is aiming, anticipation, desire, driving away, locking doors, nearness, optimism, planning, preparation. And the reason, as I said, the reason why I put Savile and Hindley together is because it's not quite clear when you read the analysis who he's talking about or who it's about. Is it about him, or is it about both of them, or is it just about her? And then Savile on his own, disclosure, secrets, pass by place, because it's mentioned about passing a place, unveiling. And victims, rest in peace or rest in paradise, compliance, death, hurrying, rebuking, shock, stripping, trembling, upsetment. Moving on to the components, the themes for the forward analysis. I've got raison d'etre, another reason for being. Reason for being at the interview. So I've got cheating, defrauding, falsification, forgery, swindling. Outline to outline, agony, death, forgiveness, passing by. 3 conditions, assurance, breadwinning, conditions, driven, entitlement, guarding, hiding in position, protection, security, shielding, availing. So the conditions are the conditions that are actually placed on the, like I was saying, the conditions that are placed on the event by Savile in both cases, but sort of like coming from both directions, from his direction, which are unknown, and by the interviewer, and from the interviewer's direction. And for the interview, appearance, sprucing, cowardice, embarrassment, enthusiasm, joy, optimism, shyness, and wanted to feel. In other words, to feel wanted. And there's a parallel there with the other analysis that I performed, where he does his final radio presentation. In that, here he's talking. There is a mention of like shaving, a person shaving themselves, and a woman's like sprucing herself up. So here we've got sprucing, and this thing. There's also like a general theme in the previous analysis that I've done of him feeling lonely. So here he's like he wants to feel important, and so that's why he's taking part in the interview. So yes, all in all, that's all I have for you today with regards to this quotation that was taken from this enigmatic statement that was taken from Jimmy Savile that the interviewer was unable to unravel, as he mentions in his news article. And I hope for him and for everybody else, I've managed to shed some light on that. This is consonant analysis, which is where we try to determine the underlying meaning from somebody's speech. It's a hypothetical method, so it's not got credence amongst academia or professionals, but that's why this channel exists, to actually showcase the technology in the hopes that it will gain some credence as the analyses proceed. So I'm Chris. Thanks for being with me today. I hope you enjoyed the analysis, although it was on a rather unsavoury subject. Keep posted and hope to see you in the next analysis.